Stephanie here, and today I have a video sharing how I created this fun little winter scene featuring this little winter bunny. I have had a lot of questions on social media asking for me to do a video sharing how I've been coloring the different winter scenes that I have been creating with my Copic markers. So before I even begin, I just want to mention that I am not an artist. I'm not a professional colorer. I'm just kind of learning as I go. And I definitely want to recommend that you check out different actual artists online as well as their classes and stuff. A good one is Sandy Allnock. She is one of my favorites. And one of the great things I love about her is that she really inspires you to put your markers on the paper and attempt to make something, even if it doesn't end up what you expect. She kind of helps take away that fear of not doing a good job when you do the coloring, and then you kind of surprise yourself at what you end up with. So I have learned a lot of what I do in my coloring from her, as well as other artists that I have watched online, on YouTube, and various other places online. So before I get into the coloring, like I said, I just wanted to mention that this is not, my born ability. I just kind of practice constantly. I'm always coloring. And I'm just kind of slowly getting better at it. I do feel like I have definitely made an improvement, but there are definitely areas as well that I need to improve on. And I just have fun with it. I color, and if I mess it up, I just throw it away, or I do what I can to salvage it. So I'm going to kind of go through the process in this card here and show you how I created this little winter scene with this bunny skating. So the original card that I created, I used the Polar Bear stamp set, and I decided to mix it up and use these two stamp sets here, which is You Make My Heart Spin and You Make My Heart Melt. I'm going to use the bunny image for my main image, and then I'm going to use the sentiment on the finished card at the end from the other stamp set. So to start off, I'm just stamping the image with some extreme black hybrid ink onto a piece of white cardstock. And this is literally the only stamping I'm going to do on the whole project. Everything else is going to be completely created with my Copic markers. Now, when I do coloring on a panel like this, I like to tape my panel down to a hardboard. I don't really know why. It doesn't really make a difference with Copic coloring. I like to do this with watercolor to kind of help the paper not warp as much. But when you're doing Copic coloring, you don't really have that problem. So I'm not really sure why I prefer this, but I just find it's easier to color when I can kind of move the whole board around and kind of have that underneath of my paper surface. So the first thing I'm going to do in this scene is I'm going to kind of figure out where I want my skating pond. So I'm just taking my marker, so I'm starting off with a B21, and I'm just kind of drawing some quick lines at the top of the bunny and at the bottom. And those are going to represent the bottom area of the pond that will eventually lead into snow. And I'll just mention now the bottom area is probably my least favorite part of the whole entire scene. I definitely need to work on the transition of the pond into some snow. And then the top line is just going to be my kind of horizon line, and we're going to create a forest in the background there. So I just have a nice area now to work with. And I'm just taking that B21 and I'm adding some more color to the edges of the pond. So I'm just kind of going in a stripy formation, kind of doing some flicking techniques. And then I'm also adding a little bit of shadow underneath of that bunny image so you can kind of see a reflection in the ice of her image. Now moving on to the sky, I wanted to create a moon to make this kind of a nighttime skating scene. And you can do this one of two ways. You can have like a circle die cut and kind of trace around it to get a really nice perfect circle. Or you can do as I'm doing here and just kind of freehand it. I've done it both ways, and I kind of like the look of freehanding it. Sometimes you kind of have to keep coloring and your moon gets pretty big until you get to the circle shape that you're going for. But I kind of like the kind of free-flowy look of doing it freehand. So what I did is I used a C1 marker to create the moon, and then what I am doing now is I'm taking my B91, which is going to be my base kind of sky color, and I drew a line around the moon, leaving a little bit of white, which is going to help kind of give that glow effect. And now I'm going to color in the entire sky, and this is going to take a while. There is a lot of color layering. That's probably the main thing I want to mention with these types of scenes, is that there is a lot of coloring and a lot of layering. And there's a lot of times when everything looks terrible and nothing is blending and you're just kind of not sure. And even at the end of this, when you had done layers and layers of color, I still felt like I didn't get the perfect blend that I wanted. But that is where the magic of snow comes in, because when you add all of the snow detail over top, it kind of helps mask some of that blending if you don't get it completely perfect. And I know going into this already that I'm going to be creating a pretty large forest in the background that's going to cover most of my sky area. So a lot of the color that we lay down here is not even going to actually be visible once we finish with all of the coloring. So I'm using a range of B colors here, so I will list all of the Copic markers that I am using in the description below, but I'm just going back and forth between my B91 all the way up to my B99. So I have all of the range there. I think there's 5 in total. And I'm concentrating the darkest color on the outside edges and more of it towards the left where the moon is kind of far away. And then I'm slowly coming in towards the moon and blending into the lightest color as I go. And once I got the base layer down, I started to kind of color in a circle motion kind of around the moon. I didn't want that liney look going up and down. I wanted it more to look like there was like a radiating glow off of the moon. And like I mentioned before, you'll see when it's finished, you can kind of see those lines still more than I wanted to. So I would have preferred to have this blended out a little bit more, but I think it still looked okay in the end result. And like I mentioned, I'm just going back and forth between all of these B colors and just I just keep blending and blending and adding color until I have it to a point where I'm kind of okay with it. And then I just moved on to the next part. So I didn't like the bottom. I felt like it was a little bit too choppy and not as smooth straight across as I wanted it. So I added a little bit of detail with my darkest color just to kind of straighten out that horizon. And now I'm starting to add in my trees. So when I do trees in a nighttime scene, I like YG97 and YG99. And what I like to do is I like to lay down the lighter color first, which is the 97, which doesn't really look that light, but it is lighter than the 99. And I like to do all my tree formations first with this color. So I just very quickly kind of draw kind of little squiggly marks until I kind of have something that looks like a tree. I have practiced trees a lot, and I still don't 100% love how mine come out, but I definitely think I have improved tremendously over how my trees looked when I first started. And as you do them, you kind of get a better feel for how big you want them and how much kind of detail you want on the sides to really make them kind of look like pine trees in the distance. So I'm just kind of adding in the trees until I'm happy with the design. And then I'm going to take my darker color and I'm going to add some color directly over top of the lighter trees. And I just like the contrast that this gives. I don't really cover the whole tree. I want to still be able to see some of that lighter green showing through. But I like the contrast of having a little bit of the darker color on top. I just feel like it gives the trees a little bit more texture and dimension, and I just really like the overall look of that. So once I finished with the trees, I decided to go back into the sky and try and blend that a bit more. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't really like that liney detail I had around the moon, and I still kind of ended up with it, but I blended it out a little bit more to a point that I was much happier with. And then with the moon, I like to add in a little bit more color than just that gray C1. So I'm taking in my lightest blue color, which is my B91, and I'm just adding some blue over the gray, and then I'm going to go back over the blue area with the gray marker just to kind of tone it down a bit. And you can do this 2 ways. I like to do my moons with both blue shading as well as yellow shading. So it just kind of depends on the scene. And with this type of scene here, I like the blue more than I like the yellow. And then I also use my colorless blender up there in the sky to kind of clean up the edges of the moon and kind of fade the color so it looked a little bit more glowy than what I had started with. So now we're moving on to the bottom area. So this is the ice and the snow. So we're going to add more detail here now that we have finished with the sky. And this, like I mentioned, is my least favorite part of the whole scene. The pond ended up a little bit darker than I wanted, and I had a lot more kind of stripy looking color than a blended look, and I kind of prefer that it would have been a little bit more blended, but I just kind of kept working with my markers, and I started with my lightest color first, and once again I'm using the same B colors that I used for the sky, so I haven't changed this at all. The pond is going to be completely the same colors, but we're not going to have as much dark color as we do in the sky area. So what I do first is I just take my lightest colors and add a bunch of coloring like down the sides, and I leave the center area pretty open. I want it to look like the moon is reflecting on the ice, so I don't want a lot of color in the center area. So just like before, I'm just going to repeatedly layer color until I get to a point that I'm happy with. And this did take me quite a while. I worked on the ice for quite a bit. And you'll see at the end when I show you the 2 cards side by side that this card ended up being a lot darker. I had much more color kind of in towards the center of the pond, and like I mentioned, has more of a stripy look to it versus a more blended look. So I definitely think I preferred the ice that I created in the polar bear scene. But I feel like this one worked because my night sky ended up a lot darker in this card as well. So I feel like the ice and the sky kind of went together, and overall the scene really came together once I had it completely finished. And I did work on the shadow quite a bit underneath of the bunny image. I kind of used my medium blues first, and then I went in with a little bit of a darker color you'll see in a bit here. And then after I had it completely colored, I did go in with some gray as well, that same C1, and I just kind of added some of that around that shadowy look just to kind of make it look more blended into the ice and not so stark. So right now it's pretty dark, and I ended up blending that out a bit because I didn't like how dark it looked. Now for the snow underneath, so I kind of want this to look like I have a pond and then I have some snow here. So the pond kind of ends and the snow starts. And I'm not really sure how to create that look. So I just kind of have a pretty definite line where the pond is ending, and I have like a little bit of white space, and then I have some gray color and some more muted blue colors. And I'm not really sure that it works. I think at the end it seemed okay because I ended up putting a sentiment banner on and it kind of covered it a little bit. But that is definitely something I would prefer to work on more, is kind of learning a little bit more how to transition out of the pond that I had created, or the ice lake, and kind of go into a snow look. So like I said, it's not perfect, but I think at the end it worked out okay, and you can kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to show, even though I didn't necessarily love how I showed it. So we have completed the background pretty much now. I'll probably go back in, I think, a couple times, maybe with some colorless blender to kind of help blend that out. And here's that little gray detail I added that I mentioned on the little shadow area. So now we just need to color in the bunny image. And this is just basic Copic coloring. I decided to make the bunny some warm grays. And then I'm using some various shades of red to color in her scarf and the bottom area of her coat. And then I'm going to use some lighter reds, the R22 and the R24, I believe. And I'm going to use that in the center area of her coat, just to kind of give her pretty much an all red outfit, but a little bit of different shading in each part of the outfit. I decided to make her skates black instead of white, since I have so much white area on the ice there, and we have her as a gray image. I just felt like the black would look a little bit better and help to ground her onto the ice. So here's that colorless blender that I mentioned. I'm just going in and trying to soften up some of those lines because I didn't like how dark I had the color or how much it kind of went into the center. And then once I have that done, I decided the scene was done. I had gotten it to a point that I was happy with. So now is the fun part of adding all of the snow. And this takes forever. I'm not going to lie, it takes quite a bit of time to dot all of these little dots all over the scene. So I am going to really speed this up, but I am going to leave it in because it's kind of fun to see all of the snow kind of appear over the scene. And the thing you want to remember when you do a snowy scene like this, where you want it to pretty much be a blizzard and have it completely snowing, is that you want snow on everything, because when you are actually out in the snow, it snows all around you. It doesn't just snow behind you or in front of you. So you just want to make sure that you're adding all of these little dots kind of everywhere on the scene, including over your image, and that will really make it look realistic and like it is actually snowing everywhere in the scene. And like I mentioned earlier, this really helps to cover up any imperfections if there's any areas you weren't happy with. So now is my favorite part. I love taking the tape off and seeing the panel finished with a little bit of white around it. Maybe that's why I love having this tape down. I'm not really sure, but this is definitely my favorite part. I love kind of the final reveal of the scene, and I feel like that white border really makes it pop and really stand out, and I was really happy with this once I removed the tape and saw it completely finished. So now I'm just going to turn this into a quick card. So I added a sentiment there with a sentiment banner, and I'm going to cut it out with a stitch rectangle die, and then I'm going to adhere it onto a white card base. And for the polar bear panel that I had colored, I ended up doing the same thing. I used the stitch rectangle and die cut that one as well, and I also adhered that one to a white card base. So I'm going to bring that one in now, and you can kind of see the side by side. So you can see the differences between the two. The polar bear one is a lot lighter. I have less color on the outside edges of the ice, as well as the sky. It's a much lighter sky. Even my trees look lighter to me. So even though I had way more dark color on the little bunny pond, I feel like it worked because everywhere else was darker in the scene as well, and not just the pond area. So you can kind of see the variation in the two. And then I also stamped the sentiment on the polar bear one directly onto the scene, which you can see in the image here, just to show the difference between having it stamped on a banner as well as having it stamped directly onto the scene. So that is my video. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was very long and I was quite rambly, but I really kind of wanted to go through my thought process and share what I was doing as I was creating it. As I mentioned before, this is, something I'm just kind of learning as I go. I'm super excited that you guys were wanting to see this, and I'm more than happy to share more in the upcoming videos. So just let me know if you would like to see more, and I will definitely do that in upcoming videos. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another video soon.